Hi, everybody. This is Pete McGilvery in the Office of Environmental Management. We are today accompanied by the Office of Environmental Management team. We're here to give you guys the environmental training to the Florida Turnpike Enterprise staff. What I'm going to first do is just kind of go through the agenda and just kind of talk about the interface and what sort of the plan is. Then we're going to let Paul Satchfield talk from FTE for a few minutes. Then we're going to hand it over to Jason to kind of kick us off. So just kind of a path forward. We're going to run through the agenda, go through the openings. We're then going to go through ETDM. We're going to do a general overview. We're going to look at some Turnpike specific tasks. We'll talk about planning versus programming. We'll look at, state versus federal projects going through that process. We'll talk about the summary reports, those products that are being developed in that system and how they're going to be used. We'll then take a short little 10-minute break, and then we'll start diving into PD&E. We'll start with an overview of the process. We'll talk about project development and purpose and need from Maria Overton. Christine Haddock will then join us. We'll talk about non-major state actions and SEERs. We have a slight change. We had Rusty Anna Moser was going to speak today, but she's actually going to speak tomorrow for us. So the public involvement piece will be done tomorrow. Then I'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about part 1, chapter 15, which is records retention and project file. We'll then break for lunch and we'll come back and we'll dive back into some more PD&E. We're going to look at the engineering piece. We're going to focus on traffic, engineering, noise. Brittany's going to join us and we're going to talk about social cultural effects, and we want to thank Maria for helping with the engineering piece. We'll then take another short break, and then after that break we'll come back, and Matt Marino is going to help us out with archaeological and historical information relative to part 2, chapter 8, and then we're going to start getting into the natural resources. We're going to look at wetlands, species, essential fish habitat, permitting, the U.S. Coast Guard, and Tu Clark is going to be leading us in that presentation. And that'll take us through the end of today. Then tomorrow, instead of a 8:30 a.m. start, we actually get a little bit of time back. We're going to start at 9 o'clock. And when we come back at 9 o'clock, we're going to go even deeper into the PD&E process. Mike Pennington's going to help us out on some more engineering related sessions. We're going to look at water resources, floodplains, aesthetics, air, contamination, utilities. And then Christine's going to come back and she's going to talk about the ARC chapter as well as how we do reevaluations. And then we're going to have another break, and then we're going to look at SWEPT. We're going to come back and give an overview of the system and how things work. And then Ruth's going to come back and do a detailed demo of how you do non-major state actions. And then you guys actually get a sneak peek of how we're going to use the SEER tool, which is actually in testing right now. But it's about to be released within SWEPT within the next month or two. So we'll show you how to use that. Then we'll have another break tomorrow and we'll do some advanced topics. Maria's going to come back and help us out. We'll do development of scope and staff hours and the scoping tool. She's also going to talk about transitioning from PD&E to design and how we do that smoothly. And then Katasha Cornwell and Margie are going to come in and talk about the differences between the state and federal processes. And then the afternoon is whatever your questions and answers are. Well, your questions are hopefully our answers, or maybe even our questions and your answers. But it's just intended to be a back and forth. Now, overall, the way this whole structure is designed is a few things for you guys. One, we're recording everything, so you're going to have access to these videos. We're intending to develop a web page that's very similar to this agenda. And right next to each one of these sessions, we're going to break those recordings into little palatable pieces that match the topic that we're recording. And so we'll break them off at each one of those spots. So after, you'll have a resource where you'll have the PowerPoint, you'll have the recording, and you'll have the materials kind of going forward. Now, if you haven't been in a virtual training before, let me show you guys just sort of the interface. Let me see if I can see that update there. And we talked about the recordings. Within the interface itself, down below, there's a chat box. You can ask her questions at any time. We have a whole team of individuals who are monitoring the chats, and Most likely, as you ask the questions, you may have other folks answering the questions as we go throughout. During each one of the sessions, if the presenter finishes early, we're going to allow for interactive question and answer at that point. You will see me, I'll be kind of the timekeeper on everything. And if things need to be kind of cut off because we're, so in depth on the conversation, but we're going to be pushing back some of the other materials, you'll hear me kind of come over the loud screen and then kind of interrupt and say, hey, we've only got a few minutes left. That's just because we have so much material to cover, and anything we don't get answered, we'll make sure we write down and we'll do a follow-up with you guys. So you're going to type in your questions here. We'll be doing that. Obviously, the whole session's being recorded, which is a great resource to you and your team. One of the things we always recognize is you're getting a lot of information now, and you might not need to use that information for months or maybe even a year. Or now you'll have a resource that you can go, how does it work for the Coast Guard? Oh, let me pull up that part. How do you do the screening event in ETDM? Let me pull up that part. You'll have some great resources. So I think with that, we were going to go back to the agenda. And the next spot on there was opening remarks. And we're going to turn it over to Paul Saxfield for FTE. And Ruth, can you open up his mic for a little bit of introduction and overview for us?
He's unmuted.
Great. Floor is yours, Paul.
All right, thank you. First, I want to thank Central Office for helping us out with all this. We know it's a big change. The Turnpike decided to put all of our PMs into kind of one barrel, and some will be doing PD&Es who have never done them before. So this is a great training for us, and we truly do appreciate you guys going out of your way to provide this training to get us all on the same page. So thank you for that. For our PMs, this is important stuff for us to learn, and the fact that they are going to have it out there in the future, let's remember that, so that when we have questions, we can go pick up the stuff that we, hey, I remember they said something about that. Let's find that. I think it's going to be a very big benefit for us. We still have Henry and Rax and Becky Bolin and some of the other very experienced PD and EPMs in our shop that we can rely on as well. But overall, I think this is going to raise our entire level of understanding of this process to a much better level, and I appreciate that. And again, I appreciate Central Office for helping us out today. So that's all I have to say. Henry, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I'm good, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Paul. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason, and hopefully my screen will refresh. And Jason, you should be unmuted.
Good morning. So I'm Jason Watts. I'm the director of the Office of Environmental Management for the state of Florida. I'm going to talk to you just for a few minutes, and then I have to run. I have other things that I have to attend to today. So the staff will take care of you and answer all of your questions. Let me start by saying, if you have any follow-up questions after the training, feel free to reach out to Pete or anybody else on the team, or call me. Just send me an email, call me if there's anything we can help you with. We're happy to do it. We're all one big team, and we think this opportunity to interact is always a good thing. I'm here, though, specifically. Pete, next slide. I'm going to talk about why we're here. Pete told you what we're going to do. I'm going to tell you why we're going to do it. So clearly, Turnpike wants the design PMs to start taking part in PD&E projects. I'll tell you, it's a different world between design and PD&E, and you may have heard it, but I want to tell you my kind of thoughts on the matter. PD&E is interesting in the respect that if you do it right, it never gets heard of. If you go through a PD&E project and check all your T's and dot all your I's and talk to all the right people and make sure that the project develops in the correct way, then design has a really easy time and the project never becomes a thorn in anybody's side. The opposite, though, is absolutely true. If it's done wrong or done sloppily or done with little thought, it can turn into a big headache in the long run. Basically, in short, I say this to everybody, what we do in PD&E is we look at everything. We look at the birds and trees and the bunnies and the air and water. We also look at people. We look at communities and how our projects are going to affect them. That analysis overall of a project is absolutely necessary to ensure that we're building the right project at the right time for the right reasons. I say it is undervalued in the respect that if it's done right, no one sees it. If it's done wrong, everybody screams that it's bureaucracy and it's taking its time. It is not a short process. It's something that needs to be done with forethought. So pay attention, and it'll go really smoothly if you follow the manual and the guidance. It's not somewhere you can take shortcuts though. Pete, next slide. Okay, this is our office, and I wanted to show you this so you had some awareness of it if you want to reach out to people in the future. That's me at the top, and then we'll just start. I want to show you the 4 sections. The section on the left there is run by Pete McGilvery. It's our quality assurance and performance section. Basically, they handle all of the systems we use to make the process work. They help us with process mappings to make sure that things are going to flow through. They also handle all of our contracting out of Tallahassee, and we have our own QA/QC section. Eric Whitehead runs it and does the work for it under Pete. And basically, we do our own self-assessments and audits every year to make sure that the system's running correctly. Then I'm going to jump all the way over to the right, and that's Maria Overton's section. And Maria basically runs a section of engineers. In the distant past, a lot of times environmental would do their work and then send it off to design, and design would say, we can't build that, and it would come back, and it would go back and forth several times. We have a staff of engineers that basically their whole job is to ensure that the PD&E process that's going through, the documents that are going through for approval are being looked at and compared to the FDM and crossing all the T's and dotting all their I's. The sections in the middle or what we call project delivery coordinators, they're our first line of communication between us and the districts and the Turnpike. They help move projects through the approval process. So in short, I keep saying the approval process. If it is a federal document, it has to come to Tallahassee. It comes to me for my signature. If it is a state document, it stays in the district for the district signature. Same for the Turnpike. If it's a federal document, it'll come up to Tallahassee for approval. If it is a state document, it stays in the Turnpike for approval. So the PDCs work on federal documents that come up to Tallahassee. There are also subject matter resources. So like Matt and Roy at the bottom are both historical and archaeological resource subject matter experts. There are people that you can reach out to, and you'll meet most of them over the next couple of days, and you'll know who to reach out to for each of your things. If you don't know, if you need a subject matter expert, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to any of the administrators at the top there. We'll find the right person to give you the right information. Next slide, Pete. So this is the way it's organized. We're going to briefly touch on this. Really what you need to know is on the right there, Matt Marino is the Turnpike's point of contact for OEM. So if you have a project specific question, that really goes to Matt, and you can ask him, and then he will find the right person to answer your question. Next slide, Pete. So NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act. Basically, we're going to talk about it briefly. Look, in the past, Turnpike, when they were going to do a project that had a federal nexus, they would allow the district to handle that project, and the district would seek NEPA approval. I think in the future, from what I've been told, Turnpike is going to start working on some NEPA projects on their own, especially since we have assignment. We'll get to assignment in a minute, but things will come to me. But NEPA is basically one law that says you have to look at all of the other laws. It says in order to do a project that has a federal nexus, you have to incorporate all of the other laws into that project review. Next slide, please. Okay, major components of NEPA. This kind of speaks for itself. If you think about PD&E though, whether it's a state project or a federal project, this slide kind of informs you of what you're doing. I like the idea that you're telling a story. You're talking about where you're building it, why you're building it, who you're building it for, you know, why it's necessary. All of those different things are what gets incorporated into your NEPA document or your state document. We also, as you see in there, it says alternatives. We always consider alternatives. We always want to make sure this is the right answer. You're going to hear this from Rusty probably tomorrow, but I'll say it. One of the big differences between design and PD&E is in design, you have the appropriate engineering decision. You have crossed your T's, you dotted your I's, you've done your math, you've built the proper project, and that's great. That's what engineers do. In PD&E, a lot of it is telling a story and trying to convince people that this is the right way, or listening to them and making sure that you hear their thoughts and ideas on the project too, and incorporate them where they are. It's partially salesman, it's partially making sure that we look at everything and then we make the proper decisions. Next slide, please. Okay, so NEPA assignment. NEPA assignment, basically in the past, when a project had to get approved, we'd box it up, we'd send it over to Federal Highway would look through the box and they would say, hey, you're missing this and this and this, and they would send it back. And then we'd make changes to it, and then we'd send it back to Federal Highway, and we'd do that back and forth until they were satisfied. Sometimes it was short, often it was very long. So we decided to take the statute, and it allows us to take what's called NEPA assignment. You'll hear it a lot. And it basically is the Florida says, you know what, we can do better. We can remove the federal government. We can take on all of those responsibilities. Next slide, please. So we basically said, we're going to remove FHWA from the picture. So now when a district decides that they need to have NEPA approval on a project, it comes up to Tallahassee, it goes to the staff you saw earlier, and we review it. And there is sometimes some back and forth to make sure we have it right, but usually we're involved very early in the project. And because we're involved very early in the project, it works very well. So it does, you can go ahead to the next one, Pete. All right, so it saves time and money. It's fewer revisions, it's fewer consultant hours, it is less work. We do a good job of working with the district to make sure that the drafts they send up for approval are right before they send them up. So there's less in time associated with those. If we do a better job early on, it also means less reevaluations when you get to design. All in all, Florida has seen I would say, not insignificant, I would say significant time savings and a cost savings on all of our PD&E projects since we've taken on NEPA assignment. Next slide. All right, these are kind of what I've already said. The couple of real important things here for you all to see is right there where it says direct consultation between FDOT and the federal regulatory agencies. In the past, we had to go through FHWA every time we wanted to interact with another federal agency. Now we actually step into the shoes of a federal agency and we can directly communicate, directly organize, directly solve problems with those other federal agencies. It's been really great. You know, we can reach out to Fish and Wildlife, we can reach out to the Corps, we can reach out to those agencies that we may have an issue with and actually have a conversation and try to solve problems. Next couple of slides, Pete, the memorandum of understanding, the next slide basically just says, this is the document that we wrote. It says what we're responsible for, what we're not responsible for. It talks about who's legally liable. It's an interesting read for a lawyer like me, but for most people, all you need to know is it gives us the right to make our NEPA decisions. It does put some requirements on things we can't do, most of them which never come up. We can't cross state borders with a project without going to FHWA. We can't have nation-to-nation contact with a tribe. Although for normal project stuff, we deal with the Native American tribes all day. It's just if they came to us and said, we want to talk to the United States nation, we can't do that. We have to send it off to Federal Highway. There's a couple other things we're not allowed to do, but most of them never really come up. Next slide, please. All right, we talked about this. Cost savings, time savings. We're responsible for the fate of our own projects. Let me be clear about something. In order to take on NEPA assignment, we waive sovereign immunity. And what that means is if you sue the state of Florida, right now there's a statute called sovereign immunity that says, well, sovereign immunity is a notion that says you can't sue the government. Florida wrote a statute that says you can sue the government, but you get capped on the amount of money you can take from the government if you sue the government. In order to take NEPA assignment, we waive sovereign immunity, which means people can sue us for an unlimited amount. It's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of risk, but it has turned out to be really wonderful. We covered the rest of that already. Questions? I have just a minute or two before I have to run off. Are there any questions? Let's see. Someone asked, do they have to follow the NEPA process? Okay, so for FTE, generally, your projects are state funded through the Turnpike, and they don't have a nexus. It's nexus, we talk about federal nexus, it's funding or location. Sometimes a location will have a federal nexus, even if the funding is all state funding. A good example, and one that'll come up on Turnpike, if you want to build an intersection, an interchange with a federal highway, with one of the interstate highways, that project on its face will have a federal nexus, which is a lot of times why those interchanges have been handed off in the past to the districts to do. If Turnpike ever decided it wanted to build one on its own, you would have to have a NEPA document for that portion of that project. We'll work with you all to make sure that happens. There are other times that if you ended up going into a federal park or something else that came along, sometimes you have to have NEPA decisions that would help. For instance, if you were going to build a big bridge and you had to get both Corps and Coast Guard approval, it may be worthwhile doing the NEPA document on our own. We would have to look at that specifically. Any other questions? All right, hearing none, I'm going to hand it back to Pete. Thank you all for your time. Learn a lot, and as I said, reach out and ask questions if there's anything else I can help you with.